High Point Historical Society, and I think we're gonna have a great program. Al Ferguson is gonna do our program today. He's a retired High Point police officer and has participated in a reenactment of I guess the D-Day parachuting, and he's gonna talk to us today. I do wanna tell you that next month, we thought we were gonna be under construction, so our monthly meeting will be at TAG Art Galleries at 400 English Road. Van Voorhees Triv is gonna talk about her granddad, Louis Voorhees, who was the architect that built the Little Red Schoolhouse and was also a very well-known artist. But thank you, Al, for coming today, and we can't wait to hear you.
Ms. Bland, I appreciate that. And as she said, my name is Al Ferguson. I retired after 30 years with the High Point Police Department. And after 30 years of dealing with people, I decided I wanted to deal with horses. And so I'm now the barn manager at a horse farm out in Oak Ridge, which is kind of funny because the 2 years I've been there, I've had a broken wrist, a broken toe, and a major concussion, which is more than I sustained in 30 years of police work. So horses are very dangerous if you didn't know that. Again, I appreciate Ms. Bland inviting me here. I also have my wife here, Jennifer Ferguson. She's in the back there. Very fortunate to have her as well. She didn't know I was going to talk about her, but she is the one who encourages me to do things like this. And without a wife like that, I wouldn't be doing any of this stuff. So kudos to her for sure. I do appreciate everything that she does for me. I saw at least one Army hat here. Are there I believe another Army hat. Are there any veterans in the group? Fantastic. Thank you all so much. We appreciate your service. Thank you for being here. So this presentation will be about my adventures in Normandy for the 75th anniversary of D-Day back in 2019. I do have a couple of things.
Can I ask you one question?
Of course, sir. Yes, sir.
Approximately how many Americans died on D-Day?
Yes, sir. About 5,000.
I knew it was quite a few.
There were about 5,000. Most of them occurred on the beaches.
Yeah.
The paratroopers, which I'll talk about today, the paratroopers jumped inland from the beaches by a few miles. So I do have a few things up here you're welcome to look at after the presentation. This flag, I will talk about this flag quite a bit. I did carry it while I was over there. It has connections to the 1st Infantry Division Museum. They were liquidating some items, and I was able to connect with them. I asked them the history behind this flag. Unfortunately, the history has been lost, but what the curator remembered was that there was no indication it was carried by a 1st Infantry Division soldier, but it was carried by either 101st or the 82nd. The 101st or 82nd, and that pleased me no end because obviously I was a paratrooper, and so I wanted to carry it back over to Normandy. And I like to think that maybe that flag in 2019 saw some things that it saw in 1944. Who knows? I have a print here. This middle print was signed by 10 different World War II veterans. And I'll talk specifically about Mr. Tom Rice at the end of the presentation. He signed this, and while he was signing it, he told me a story that I found phenomenal, and I'll share that with you all. And then this one here, I purchased this one in St. Mary Glees just a few months ago for the 80th anniversary of D-Day. It has 5 signatures from World War II veterans. This is a original World War II patch, original World War II jump wings, and a piece of original parachute. I carried those 3 items with me when I jumped in, and then this company framed everything with the print. So these are very special to me. I also have a 5-foot extension. I have a 5-foot extension for a static line, and you're welcome to pick that up and handle that. There's some sand from each of the beaches, with the exception of Sword Beach. I haven't been to Sword Beach yet, but I'm hoping for the 85th anniversary in 5 years, I can pick up some sand from Sword Beach. I have a reserve parachute, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. And then I just have some items for when I served. All right, so let's get into the presentation. Oh, there we go. Okay, so how did I get to where I am today? I served with Company H, 121st Infantry. It was a long-range surveillance unit with the Georgia Army National Guard. I served with them for 6 years. I started as the radio operator and moved up to senior scout. We worked in 6-man teams, and our job was to go deep behind enemy lines and be the eyes and ears of the U.S. Army, and we would report back what we saw. We would typically carry a pack of about 80 pounds. As the radio operator, mine would weigh a little bit more than that. So I don't miss those days. It was quite heavy, but I do miss the guys I served with tremendously. Just a good group of guys, and that's where I got into parachuting. So I had 21 jumps with the U.S. military, and then in '94, that was my last jump until 2017. And I woke up, it was a January morning, I woke up in 2017, I looked at my wife and I said, I'm gonna go jump out of airplanes again. And she said, you're gonna do what? And I said, I miss it. I miss the camaraderie and I miss jumping out of planes. And so in 2017, I hooked up with a group called X-35 Airborne. They're out of Florida. Primarily, it's former military. There are some active duty military who come and jump with us, and a couple of civilians who jump as well. We're a group of about 150 individuals, and twice a year, every February and every October, we go down and jump. So I get about 10 jumps a year, roughly. I'm up to 79 right now. I'd like to hit that 100 mark is kind of what I'm shooting for. It's called your Centurion, so that's what I'm shooting for. So this was back in 2017. We primarily jumped the C-47s, which is the aircraft you see here. The C-47s that we jumped also served during World War II, and most of them dropped paratroopers on D-Day. So they're like flying museums. It gives me goosebumps just to be inside of them, much less actually parachute from them.
Is that the same as the DC-3?
It is, yes sir. The DC-3 would be the civilian equivalent, but same aircraft, exactly. And the Canadians and the English call them Dakotas. So if you ever hear Dakota, it's the same aircraft. Let's see if this works now. Oh, it does. If you've ever wondered what it looks like at 1,200 feet, that's what it looks like at 1,200 feet. I had just gone out the door of the aircraft there. That is a 1 mile by 1 mile drop zone. And you can see how small it looks from up there. We do jump on an active airport, so occasionally you have to dodge incoming airplanes. We try to avoid that as much as possible. I do not want to be a greasy spot on the windshield of an airplane. That would be ugly for me. But that's what it looks like when you parachute out of a plane. So as I said, I joined them in 2017. In 2019, we decided to start preparing for Normandy. Actually, the planning had been going on for about a year or so. And the group that I was going with, there were about 30 of us. And so we started preparing for Normandy in February by making several practice parachute jumps. Some of the friends and equipment here. This is Mike and Richard. Mike and Richard both served with the 82nd Airborne. And actually, Richard was part of the Green Ramp incident back in '94. He got run over by a burning airplane. He survived. There were several paratroopers that were killed on the tarmac at Fort Bragg, but he's one of the survivors, and he has come back in the parachute, which is fantastic. His buddy Mike there served with him. And you can see some of the things that we go through. This is a jump master. He's checking my parachute on my back. We go through a lot of checks, several, to make sure that your parachute looks like it will function. And I say looks like because there's always that chance. We do wear a reserve on our front. And again, this is a reserve parachute over here. I'll let you, anybody who wants to pick up the reserve just to see how much it weighs, you're welcome to. The only thing I'll take the cover off. There's a silver handle. Don't pull the silver handle. It's on a spring. It's spring loaded, and so the parachute will pop out if you pull the spring, the silver handle. So don't do that part. But if you want to pick it up by the other handles, you can. This is me inside inside one of the aircraft that I jumped from. That's the static line. So military parachuting and civilian parachuting are completely different. Civilian parachuting is primarily free fall, where you jump from about 10,000 feet. Military parachuting, we jump from about 1,200 feet, and the static line, which is that yellow line there, that pulls the parachute out for us. So the line is attached to an anchor cable on the aircraft. It stays with the aircraft. And our parachute is pulled out for us. That's why we jump so much lower. This is one of my brothers here. He came down in 2019 to see us jump. And then those are the paratrooper boots. Paratrooper boots are only, even to this day, starting from 1940, when the airborne was instituted, paratroopers are the only ones who wear the paratrooper boots. We're very proud of the paratrooper boots. If anybody has watched Band of Brothers, they have a scene in there about the paratrooper boots, and so we are very proud of those. Again, there's a picture of about 1,100 feet off the ground. There's a lot going on up there. You want to avoid other jumpers. You definitely don't want to get entangled with another jumper. You want to talk to each other, and then you also have a lot of things you're doing before you land. Everybody always asks, how long does it take before you hit the ground? About 1,200 feet under a good parachute, it's about a minute. Without a parachute, it's a lot less than that.
Faster stop too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not the fall that gets you, it's that sudden stop.
Yeah.
That's what gets you. Yep. All right, I have two videos I'd like to show. Oops. And I hope this will give everybody a sense of what it's like to jump out of a plane. This first video is us training in 2019. fantastic. I've actually never had a volunteer before. That's great.
Question, I had a friend of mine that's a paratrooper.
I'm sorry?
I had a friend that was a trooper, and he jumped, and he landed on a chute. And he
Okay.
said it was like concrete, he walked off of it.
Absolutely. So yes, so this gentleman said that one of your friends, he landed, he jumped, and then there was another chute underneath him, and he landed on top of it. He said it was like concrete. Yes, you can walk off of a fully inflated parachute. You don't want to, because there's always that chance you'll fall through. And if you get entangled in all that mess, I mean, it's a dangerous sport. It really is. And so it could be very, it could be deadly. Yeah. So D-Day, and I know that I'm sure most, if not all of you all know kind of the history of D-Day. 100,000 soldiers from both the U.S. and the Allies. I'm sorry, this may be, let me back up a little bit. Yep, there we go. So the paratroopers went in first. You had 13,000 plus from the 101st and the 82nd. An additional 5,000 from mostly British and Canadian units. A total of 18,000 paratroopers. That was 800 C-47 aircraft. And I heard the other day, I haven't checked this, but someone told me that the C-47 aircraft is also called the Sky Train. It was nicknamed the Sky Train. That the train of C-47s was 5 hours long. I could not imagine that. So if you're standing there and you see the first one fly over, it would take 5 hours till you saw the last one fly over. Really an incredible feat that the U.S. was able to pull together.
The paratroopers landed first before the invasion began?
Yes, sir, they did. A few hours. And their mission was to capture different bridges, capture St. Mary Glees was a key city, a key town that they were supposed to capture. The 82nd did that. St. Mary was and this is actually St. Mary Glees here. And so that was the first town liberated by the Allies. But they jumped several hours, so the seaborne invasion did not begin until 6 a.m. And you can see paratroopers were dropping as early as just about 1 a.m., so several hours before that. So Operation Albany was with the 101st. They were the first to jump into the Carentan area. Now, there were a lot of misdrops, and again, Band of Brothers did a great job in portraying that. So the 101st was supposed to drop near Carentan, and some of them did. The 82nd dropped an hour or so later at St. Mare. Some of the 101st got dropped over St. Mare also. So you had a mixture of units fighting in different areas. You may look over and see, you might be from the 82nd, but look over and see a 101st patch. So, and again, they were widely scattered, mostly because of clouds and things like that. And of course, they're taking flak and small arms fire too. So the pilots they're anxious to get back to England. And so they're just going to kind of drop you wherever they can at that point. So as I said, a few hours later is when the coastal invasion began. You had Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Sword beaches. I've been to all of those. I have stood on Utah and Omaha at 6 a.m. In the morning, 75 years, and then again 80 years after the invasion. So that was a very poignant moment for me. Honestly, it was a very emotional moment. You see here, two of the beaches, Juneau and Gold, were linked on the first day. The others did not get linked up for quite some time. A lot of heavy fighting. Utah was one of the deadliest beaches to land on, just because of the way the bluffs overlook it. So I'm sorry I think I quoted 5,000, but somewhere around 4,000 Allied soldiers and paratroopers were estimated to have been killed. They probably will never have an exact number. Okay, so that brings us up to 2019. So in 2019, we began, as I showed, we began preparing for England. In late May and early June, we started gathering over in England. And our flight path, and I'll cover this a little more in depth later, was to take us from Duxford Airfield in England, across and jump into Centerville, France. What's so special about this jump? First, we had 21 C-47s that were participating. They came from around the world. that it was the largest gathering of C-47s to retrace these steps since D-Day. So it was a very special moment for us. There were only 200 of us that were selected to do this jump. And so there were about 10 of us on each aircraft. But to be part of that 200 that did this cross-channel jump was really something I'll never forget. So our mission was to remember and honor those who made the jump 75 years prior and who, by their courageous actions, changed the course of history. So they absolutely changed history. And again, it was about 35 of us were from my group. So why did I select 101st? I was not with the 101st. I was with the 121st Airborne out of Georgia. However, my father served the 101st. This is a picture of him in 1960. He served 3 tours in Vietnam. Most of those, 2 of those tours with Special Forces. And so we were asked to choose either 101st or 82nd, and I chose the 101st for him. A couple of my buddies over in Duxford, those are 2 Swedish para-rangers that I'm standing beside. So we had jumpers from all over the world, and that's what's so amazing about this group. If you come down and jump with us, it doesn't matter where you're from. As long as you're a good jumper, we'll accept anybody. I chose the rank of corporal. I was a specialist in the military. They didn't have specialists in World War II. The closest rank is corporal, so I chose that rank. But again, we all kind of commingled. Mike over here was also a specialist. He chose the rank of corporal. The guy in the center, he's a command sergeant major. Normally 2 corporals wouldn't be buddied up to a command sergeant major like that, but we all like each other. So he's a really good guy. Some of my group here were meeting World War II veterans. Phenomenal to meet different veterans. I'm so fortunate. 5 of the signatures on this print I actually obtained by speaking with the veterans at different events. And to hear their stories is absolutely amazing. And please, Jennifer, don't let me forget, I want to tell a story from Mr. Tom Rice at the end of this that has really stuck with me as he told me. So to meet these veterans was just amazing. The flag you see here, this is at Duxford again. That is my flag from the 1st Infantry Division Museum. And I carried it with me on the jump and then throughout France. Here's meeting another, he was actually a British paratrooper. And to meet him was pretty amazing. Okay, so on the 5th of June, we were scheduled to make a practice jump over Duxford. The aircraft that we were chosen to jump from is actually a Soviet-built aircraft. So the U.S. licensed the C-47 plans to the Soviets during World War II, and the Soviets built this Lusanov Li-2. But they couldn't follow the plans exactly because they had to do it a little different. They put the door on the opposite side of where our door was, and they made it smaller. So to jump out, even just getting in and out of this aircraft was difficult with a parachute on, but to jump out, you'll see in the next video that I show, there's a fairly large paratrooper, and he's going out the door, and he hits his head on the top of the door, and it kind of throws him back, but he's resilient, and so he ends up going out. I don't know why they made the door smaller. They could have just stuck with our plans, but they didn't. Not many people have actually flown in this aircraft since it was restored, so to fly in this aircraft was really amazing. Something I'll probably never have a chance to do again. We did not get to jump. Unfortunately, it was canceled due to high winds. You can only have 15-knot winds. Anything greater than that, and it's too dangerous to jump. And the winds here were about 20 knots, so we didn't get to jump, which was unfortunate. But we did get to fly around the airplanes. That was kind of neat. It's one of the few times I've actually landed in a C-47 after I've taken off. Most of the times I jump from it. I really like the contrast between these 2 pictures. The picture here is from World War II, and these are British paratroopers who are receiving information about the drop zones. The picture over there is from our group in 2019, and we're receiving the same information. So I really kind of like the way those 2 pictures contrast each other. And then here, that's an original sand table from World War II of the drop zone that we were jumping into, drop zone K near Centerville. Drop zone K was used by the British primarily. You'll see in one of my next slides, you'll see the city of Centerville and how close we were to it, and I'll talk about that as we get to it. All right, so now we've received our briefing. It's the 5th of June, and we're awaiting weather information for the cross-channel jump. So, board paratroopers, we're shaving each other's heads because you always need a haircut. So, we're getting haircuts, we're checking, rechecking, and double-checking our equipment just to make sure everything looks good. And we're just kind of bored at this point. The weather, we have been told the weather was really not too good at this point. There was rain, there was fog over on the drop zone. We were concerned we would not get to jump. We've come all this way, we wouldn't get to jump. And for me, so I'm not diminishing anything from 1944. We were not being shot at, and I like to make that clear. But there are some parallels that happened to us in 2019. One of them was the weather. You know, they had a weather stand down. They had to wait one entire day before they could jump. We were really concerned that we would have the same situation. Fortunately, the weather did improve. The jump was a go, and we were some excited paratroopers. We couldn't wait to get over there. So you'll see, here's Richard. He's putting my reserve parachute on me. I've already got my main on. Once all that is done, a jump master will come by and he'll double check everything for us. There's my flag again, and there's some heavy paratroopers over there. We are really excited about jumping. We were chosen to jump from an aircraft called That's All Brother. Now that is very significant. Of the 200 paratroopers jumping, there were 20 of us that were chosen to jump from That's All Brother. This aircraft led the entire airborne invasion in 1944. She also participated in Market Garden and the Berlin Airlift. She was then sold from the military to a private contractor, private companies. And then in 2015, she had been scrapped. And fortunately, in 2015, some Air Force historians found her in a boneyard, rusting away. And she was scheduled to be sliced up. They found her, they checked the serial number to confirm that was her, and she's been restored to flying condition. I've had the pleasure and the honor of jumping from her 3 different times, but to be on the lead aircraft from 1944 for this cross-channel jump was absolutely amazing. Again, a flying museum. So we boarded her, we were headed to Centerville. It was supposed to be a 2-hour flight, turned into 2.5 hours. We'll talk about that here in just a second on why that happened. This is me in the aircraft. Again, That's All Brother. This picture that was taken here means a lot to me. Not because it's a fantastic picture, but it's what I'm going through. I didn't know that picture had been taken for weeks after we got back. And the friend of mine who took it sent it to me. We had just taken off, and it suddenly hit me about what we were doing. We were retracing the steps that they did in 1944. And so I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about being in this aircraft. What were the men going through? What were they thinking as they took off? And I remember looking around, and I saw the same look on everybody's faces. Some people had their eyes closed. Some people were just looking down like I was. We were all wondering, what were they thinking as they took off? And here we are, 75 years later, we're taking off as well. Again, I like the contrasting pictures. This is 1944, the eve of D-Day. And then that's us 75 years later. This is us going across the channel. Literally, you look out the small windows, or you look out the open door, and that's what you see. Absolutely amazing to have, they're called sister ships, to have the sister ships flying by you. Just absolutely amazing. They're all filled with paratroopers, and we're all about to do the exact same thing. And then we had our little friends. That's what the bombers used to call the fighter planes. Our little friends escorted us across the channel as well. You had the British Spitfire and the U.S. Mustang. And you could look out the door and literally see them kind of zooming by us. Ian was the jump master. This is Ian. He took great care of us, especially with the information he had. So I mentioned it was a 2.5-hour flight instead of 2 hours. We're flying across the channel. I had taken some Dramamine just because I was a little seasick. I can jump out of planes, I just don't, riding them makes me a little seasick sometimes. And I actually fell asleep. And I know I tell people, I'm getting ready to jump out of a plane across, but I had fallen asleep. So he wakes everybody up. And, let's see, actually the map will illustrate better. So we were supposed to leave, you see 1340, that's 1:40 in military time. We were supposed to leave the ground at 1:40. We didn't leave until 3:30. So several hours later, that's the way the military typically operates. You're always late. So we finally left. It was a 1-hour time change. So we didn't jump into Santerville until almost 7 p.m. So the flight across was fantastic. We saw the aircraft passing us. We crossed over Eastbourne here. We saw the White Cliffs, and I'm not sure if I have a picture of the White Cliffs. Just beautiful. The aircraft door is open, so it's very loud. You can hear the engines and everything. It's very loud. It's a little cold crossing over the channel. We get to La Havre there, and Ian, our jump master, gives us the commands to stand up. So we do. And we can feel the aircraft turning and starting in our jump run on Santerville. Well, suddenly, we made a pretty sharp turn back out towards the channel. And we found out later that there was another group, a civilian group, that had the air and over the drop zones. They weren't allowing us to jump, so we had to turn back around. So we came back over La Havre. We come back to do our run on Santerville, and suddenly we made another turn, but it was even sharper. And what we found out later, and I'm really happy, Jennifer, I don't think I actually told you this story. We almost collided with another aircraft. So you had that happening as well. You had a lot of aircraft in the air who hadn't done this before, trying to fly in formations, and we almost collided. So they aborted the run on Santerville. We had to turn back around and come back out. Our third attempt, 3's the charm. We got to jump. But the reason I like to tell that story is we were standing for 40 minutes inside this aircraft wearing 80 pounds of gear, and you have your hand up like this with a static line. You can't drop your shoulder because if you do, the static line could get tangled underneath you and you could lose the skin on your arm. So you want to make sure it's up like this. So in a rocking aircraft for 40 minutes with 80 pounds of gear, trying to keep your arms up, I actually looked at my buddy Richard at one point and I said, just tell them to put us out. I just want to get out of the airplane. Tell them to I don't even care what country we're over at this point. I don't care. So, but we did get to make the jump. So here's me. I don't know if you can tell, I'm tired. I am exhausted at that point. 40 minutes of standing there. But these are us in the aircraft right before we jump. I was what's called the pusher, the last man out. And so I did get to kind of lean against the bulkhead there that separates us from the pilots. That was kind of nice, but it didn't offer a whole lot of relief. So they finally put us out. Ian gave us the word go, and this is us going out. This was taken from a helmet camera that I had. You can see here, so this is how the static lines hook up to the anchor cable. And you'll see that in the videos that I showed, or the video I showed, and then you'll see it in the next one too. So this part actually stays with the aircraft and it pulls the parachute out for you. There's my first view of France. I'd never been to France before. I kind of liked what I was seeing, with one huge exception. The town of Santerville. we were directly over the town of Centerville. We weren't supposed to be directly over the town of Centerville. You don't want to land in a town, believe me. They had dropped us about a mile long. For whatever reason, we were about a mile past the drop zone. So I was a little nervous and a little worried at this point. So they dropped us over the town. We were all able to get back to these fields and these drop zones. I actually landed right in this, there's a huge hedgerow here. So I landed in that hedgerow. I flipped upside down and fell about 12 feet and landed on my back. It didn't feel real good. The funny part was the side of the hedgerow I landed on was somebody's backyard. A kid, a 12-year-old, 10-year-old, runs out from the house, looks at me, screams, and runs back into his house. And I'm like, I guess he wasn't expecting us. I don't know. And so two French guys came up, very thick accents, but they spoke English. And they said, "You okay?" And I said, "I'm fine." I said, "Well, I'll be honest with you. What country am I in?" I didn't know. We'd flown around for 2.5 hours. We could have been in Italy for all I knew. And he confirmed we were in Normandy, and that was good. But here's floating down. You can see the C-47s. A lot of guys were dropped. Some of the guys were dropped correctly. Our aircraft, again, dropped us a little long. So that's the hedgerow behind me, which is where the person's backyard was. You see my parachute there. I'm extremely happy to be on the ground at this point. Really happy. And then I snapped this picture, too, of some of the paratroopers coming in. Again, 200 paratroopers, 21 C-47s, the largest to retrace these steps since D-Day. My brothers met me on the drop zone. I didn't know they were going to do that. I knew they were going to be in Normandy. I didn't know they were going to get to see the drop. And they actually, I had told them what aircraft and what position I was in just in case. So they actually saw me jump from the airplane, which was really special. So these are my two brothers. To see them in the crowd waving as I walked in was pretty amazing. The fact that we got dropped long actually worked out for us pretty neat. We got to ride in World War II Jeeps and trucks on the way back. So that was kind of neat. The French, especially in the Normandy area, take immaculate care of these vehicles that we left behind. They are proud of them. It's kind of a status thing. And during the D-Day celebrations, you'll round a corner in a dirt road and there'll be a tank sitting there. And it's amazing. So so that was really neat to ride in those trucks back. That's part of my group. That's not the entire 200. And then, of course, the sign for Centerville. So after the jump the next day, this is me at 6:30 in the morning on June 6th, standing on Omaha Beach. Again, just an amazing time. You don't see many people there, and there's a reason for that. I had a contact over in France, a very nice Frenchman, who emailed me and said, if you don't get there early, you won't get there at all because the police are going to block it off. We have some dignitaries coming in. So my group got up at 3:30 in the morning, went around the unmanned police barricades, and got to the beach. And we were one of the only people to actually get out there. So again, to have this picture, to be standing there at 6:30, which was 75 years to the day and time that men were coming ashore, was really special. You can see those cliffs, and that's why this beach was so deadly. The Germans had the high ground. There's us again. I want to tell the story about the Jeep real quick. So we walked out on the beach, and the Jeep was there with a gentleman, and he's a reenactor from England. We talked to him briefly. Obviously, you see what we're wearing, exactly what I'm wearing now. And we said we had just jumped in, so he remembered that part, which plays into this. So we took a picture of his Jeep, we shook his hand, thanked him, and we left. That was in 2019. 5 years later, just a few months ago, we're back for the 80th anniversary. We're at a different beach, and we see a Jeep on the beach. And we walk out, it's the same guy. 5 years later. And he remembered us. He's like, you guys are the ones that jumped in. We're like, what? This is crazy. But he'd been telling his friends about us, the fact that we jumped in, for 5 years. And then just as a fluke, we meet him again. It was just really, I mean, sometimes, things just work out. So Point du Hoc, the Rangers were tasked with taking Point du Hoc. Point du Hoc was on the cliffs, and it was a German gun emplacement. So the Rangers had to scale these cliffs in order to get up to it. 75% of the Rangers were casualties. Now, not killed, but wounded. Thank goodness not killed. A lot of them were killed. They did manage to take Point du Hoc. You can see me standing there, and again, that's my flag there. These were the gun emplacements on top of Point du Hoc. Now, the Germans put up a lot of resistance. From what I understand, the guns were actually not there. They had been moved back a couple days prior. So while the Rangers did take it, and it was strategically important, the actual guns were not there that day. St. Mary-Glise, again, a very important town for the 82nd Airborne. St. Mary was the first town to be liberated by the Allies. And so if you ever go during the D-Day celebrations, that's really where you should go. Most of the paratroopers who are there to celebrate gather in St. Mary. Private John Steele. You can see a mannequin hanging there, and that mannequin is still there as of today. Private John Steele jumped in with the 82nd Airborne, and he got stuck on the steeple up there on the roof of the. You can actually see the church here depicted pretty well. So he gets stuck up there, and he plays dead for a little while, and a German sees him up there. A German points his rifle and fires and takes off the heel of his boot. And John Steele plays dead. Just plays dead. German thought, I killed him. German goes about his business. A few hours later, they realize he's not dead. Somebody crawls out, a German crawls out and is able to bring him into the church, and they take him prisoner. And then a few hours later, the Germans realize things aren't going their way. They release him, and he's repatriated with the 82nd Airborne. But he hung up there. They're very proud of the mannequin. I mean, that's part of their history. And so that mannequin is still there. And there's another story. There's a home down here where a 82nd Airborne landed in the courtyard of a home. A German officer is billeted in that home. The German runs out and takes the American prisoner. And within a short amount of time, the German's like, I don't like what I'm seeing here. There's too many Americans. Releases the American, and the American takes the German prisoner. So a lot of those kinds of stories in St. Mary. Lieutenant Denny Thompson. So this print that I purchased, I actually purchased over in St. Mary-Glise from a studio called Aces High. Caroline is the manager of the studio. We've gotten to know her very well. And she also purchased this one in just for the 80th anniversary just a few months ago. But that was the first one I printed. Lieutenant Thompson, you can see him actually signing my print. His signature is down there, and you can see him signing it. But he was a B-24 Liberator bomber. He was a pilot for a B-24 Liberator. And so on D-Day, he is flying across the channel in his aircraft, and he is tasked with bombing the HQ, the German HQ over in France. He looks down and he sees all of these ships loaded with men headed towards the beaches. And he told me this. He said, I looked down and I thought, oh my God. And then within a few seconds, he's like, may God be with you. And I find that incredibly, again, poignant. And I'm sure he wasn't the only man thinking about that. So to see what these young men went through, just amazing. The camaraderie with Airborne. This is a French paratrooper. I met him in St. Mary, and I presented him with a patch, our unit patch at the time. And he didn't have anything to give back, which was fine. I wasn't expecting anything. But he took off his beret And pinned inside his beret was his St. Michael pendant. Now, St. Michael is the patron saint of paratroopers. We typically all carry one. To give somebody your St. Michael is very special. And so he presented me with his St. Michael. I still got it. It's in my safe at the house. So, again, some of the equipment. So literally, you would round a corner and you would see stuff like this. And they are so proud that they have it, and it's meticulous. It's like people here in the States keeping up with sports cars. It's the same feeling for them. Some of my buddies in St. Mary Glees. And then this is the last photograph, and it was taken as we walked along Utah Beach. I have one more video to show, and then we'll open it up. But does anybody have any questions before that?
I have one.
Sure.
Where did the gliders go in?
They went into the outskirts of St. Mary, Carrington, just kind of all over that peninsula. There were different landing zones for them. And they came in several hours after the initial parachute drop.
They took some meat.
They did. So I don't know if a lot of people know, but the gliders were just made of wood, primarily. And so, yeah, when you hit the ground in a glider, if you also hit a ditch, it would break apart. So a lot of casualties with the gliders. I'd rather jump from a plane than be in a glider, for sure. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
Quick question about prisoners of war. Were there any POWs?
Were paratroopers taken prisoner? I'm sure there were, for sure. A lot of paratroopers were killed because the Germans flooded the drop zones, and so a lot of them drowned. But then I'm sure that they were. I don't have any I don't have any stories about that, but I'm sure they were, especially with the missed drops. So I can attest to the fact that we're jumping in daylight, we're not being shot at, and it was difficult for me to find some of my guys with all of us jumping, just 200 of us. You get 18,000 paratroopers jumping at night and being shot at, scared to death, and and having the missed drops. I'm sure that they wound up wandering into German, lines. Yeah.
They were all kids.
They were kids. They were 18, 19, 20 years old, just kids.
Yeah, a lot younger than you were.
A lot younger than me, for sure. Yeah, for sure. This next video was taken and was put together during this jump. So this is what we were experiencing. that was only 200 of us. Can you imagine as a German looking up and seeing 18,000 paratroopers? Truly amazing. I wanted to say something real quick about this uniform too. This is a faithful reproduction of the World War II paratrooper uniforms. As you can see, a lot of pockets. What they jumped with is all they had for who knows how long. And so your stuff in your pocket's full of everything you could think of. One neat little pocket is this one up here. So the Army does a lot of things kind of weird, but this pocket they did right. So this is where you would put your jump knife. This is a reproduction of a jump knife. And the reason they wanted it here, and there's a zipper on either side, is so that you could access it with your right or left hand, and you could cut yourself free if you got stuck up in trees or something. So I thought that was, I didn't, for the longest time, I didn't know what that pocket was for, and then I found out. So you can also see the leg tie downs here. They did that. The pockets down here are reinforced. They did that because the thinking at the time was the opening shock of the parachute may make some of your heavy equipment fly through the bottom of your pockets. So they wanted to make sure they reinforced them and they tied them down. And then the pockets up here, primarily the 101st Airborne Division did these pockets. These were just pockets taken off of old jackets and old uniforms and just sewn up here. So a lot of times they weren't even the same color as the actual jacket you were showing them onto. So a lot of thought was put into this. This is exactly what you would see a World War II paratrooper wearing, with the exception of the beret. So the beret came into service in 1963 for the Airborne. And it's awarded to those who serve in airborne units, not to those who have been through airborne school, but who serve in an actual unit that's on jump status. And so my unit in the military was on jump status. We jumped every 3 months, and so we were awarded the beret, and it's a very proud thing for us to wear. You see another person wearing the beret, you know they serve in an airborne unit on jump status. So there is the one story that I really wanted to tell, Private Tom Rice. So I was up in Ohio, and we were making a jump for Pee Wee Martin. Pee Wee Martin was a 101st paratrooper in World War II, and it was his 100th birthday party. And so we're doing a special jump for him, and he had invited some of his friends who were also D-Day veterans, paratroopers. And so we got to meet different veterans, and one of the ones I met was Tom Rice, and I had this print with me, and I asked him to sign it. He said he'd be happy to. He's sitting at a table. There's a long line of guys behind me who want to speak to Mr. Rice, and he's there with his granddaughter. And so he starts to sign my print, and he stops, and he looks up at me. He says, "Do you want to hear a story?" I'm like, "Heck yes, I do." Yeah. I said, "Sir, that'd be phenomenal. I'd love to hear a story." Well, of course, everybody behind me now gathers around. They want to hear the story too. So he said that he jumped in on D-Day with the 101st Airborne Division. He lands, and I should have pointed out, it's called the Dial of Death, is what it was nicknamed. It's the dial on the front of your gear to get out of your parachute. Now, they've done away with that because it was dangerous and it was hard to get out of. There's now just some straps and things. But they had this dial of death, and when it got muddy, it was very hard to get it twisted so you can get out. So he lands in Normandy, and he struggles to get out of this dial of death. He finally is able to get out of it. He takes everything, and this is what he's telling me, takes everything off. He says, "I look over and I don't see anybody." And finally he says, "I see a guy that looks like the same uniform." So I run up to him. He didn't know the guy. Runs up to him. A couple guys then find each other. He didn't know any of the guys, but they find each other all wearing the same uniform. That's kind of what you were looking for at the time. And they move out. And they get to this brick wall that was kind of knocked up. Part of it was knocked over, but it was still standing to a certain height. They can hear guys on the other side. Have you all heard of the crickets that the paratroopers carried, the little crickets? I had never heard a story of anybody using those until Mr. Rice told me. He said he took out his cricket and he clicks it. And he got the response, the correct response from the other side of the wall. So they knew that these were friendly. So they all form up. Well, when this was happening, one of his guys had pulled out a hand grenade, and he was so nervous that it was Germans, he pulled the pin. So now you got a live hand grenade. So Mr. Rice takes the hand grenade, throws the grenade into a ditch, and in his word, he said, "I hit the dirt." And he lays down. The ditch was full of mud and water. The grenade explodes. He is now covered in water and mud. He said, again, his words, he says, "I've been in Normandy 3 minutes, and I'm already soaking wet and covered in mud." I mean, that was just the kind of guy he was. So, he's soaking wet. So they form up, and they move out, and they find this French farmhouse. But they don't know if it's occupied by the French or by the Germans. They don't know. So they surround the French farmhouse. And Mr. Rice is nominated, he's voluntold to go knock on the door. So he goes up, bangs on the door, and within a minute or two, the door slowly opens, and it's a Frenchman. He's standing there in this white nightgown with this white, what do you call them? The nightcaps, the white nightcaps. He's holding an old candlestick that's glowing. It's lit up. Mr. Rice says, he looked at the man and he's like, "Am I in a Charles Dickens storybook?" He said, "This is nuts." He said, "But there's no time for Charles Dickens. This is war." And he wished the guy a good night, and they went on. So I thought that was a fascinating story. His granddaughter looked at me after he finished the story, and she says, "I've never heard that story before." Just fascinating. So I have written it all down. It's actually on the back of that print, so that when my son inherits these prints, he'll have that story. So that's really the end of the presentation. Is there any questions? Yes, sir.
Who provides the uniform?
We purchase these ourselves. And there is a company who makes the faithful reproductions. They actually have the templates from World War II, and they make them.
How was the paratrooper armed when he hit the ground?
Yep, so you're going to have an M1 brand. Some of them had the M1 carbines. Most carry pistols, especially if you were an officer, you'd carry a pistol. Almost everybody carried a knife, some type of knife. So those would be the primary. You got the Thompson submachine guns they would have been carrying. Those would have been the primary
How
weapons.
about grease guns?
Grease guns were carried. A lot of those were carried by British.
Yeah,
Yeah, they were. You're right.
and they carried Sten guns too.
Sting guns, exactly.
Is a parachute used by airborne today the same parachute?
Good question. It's not. It's not. So the parachutes you saw that we use, they're called the SF-10A. They're the low-level assault parachute for the Army used by special operations because they have the toggles and you can kind of steer them. Not like a sport parachute, but you can guide them is really a better term. In World War II, they were using more of a T-10 variant. I don't know the exact nomenclature for it. You didn't have toggles. You had to pull the risers down if you wanted to go one way or pull them the other way. So you had to do it that way, and it wasn't steerable at all. It would slip from one side to the other side. The Army today is using, it's not a square canopy, but it's got some characteristics of a square canopy. And they're not as steerable as what we jump, because if you're doing a mass jump, you really don't want people flying around up there steering themselves because you'll collide. So you want more experienced people using the steerable canopies. So what the Army's using today is not very steerable. It's much larger, so they can carry heavier equipment too. Yeah, good question. Yeah. Yes, sir?
You didn't mention anything about the Duxford Museum.
I did. You're right. A fantastic museum. I guess you've been.
I have.
Yeah, it's a fantastic museum. We spent quite a bit of time during our downtime in that museum. I'd love to go back. I want to take Jennifer and my son over there. But that's a really neat museum over there. Yeah. And they do a lot of presentations, and they have different aircraft come in that they sponsor too. So.
You can actually belong to that museum. And
Oh, okay. You can have a membership.
Great website.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I'll have to jump on there since I've been. I'll jump on there and join.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome. Yeah. When were you there?
91, 92.
Okay. Yeah, that's about the time I was becoming a police officer here. Long time ago, huh? Yes, ma'am.
Speaking of Duxford and the aircraft, once the aircraft dropped, was that the first wave when they went back? Did they have more paratroopers, or did everybody go at once
For us or for D-Day?
for D-Day?
For D-Day. So yes, everybody, the 800 aircraft would all go at once, but like I said, it was kind of spread out like a train.
And then they returned to their bases in the US?
No, they returned to England, actually. So a lot of those were tasked with pulling gliders later, after the main body of paratroopers had
Right.
jumped. So they would return to England, get gliders, and take them back over. They would also get equipment, food, that sort of thing, and do drops. So yeah, they would stay over in England.
But they were in continuous service the whole?
They were.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks,
Yeah, they
that's
sure
what I
were.
wanted to know.
Did any of the ships you had in Florida go with you?
Any of the
The planes that you had in Florida?
yes, so that's all brother. We jumped from her. Placid Lassie is our main aircraft that we use down
So they
in Florida.
flew them over?
They did. And the gentleman back here, we were talking about the hump, is what it's called. And one of your relatives, was that right?
Yes, my brother.
Your brother.
Yeah.
So his brother used to fly the C-47s
Yeah, sequel seven.
over the hump. So it's up around Greenland. And you stop for fuel and everything in Greenland, and then back down towards England. So it's called flying the hump. And it's a several-day journey.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Who coordinated all this for y'all's
Whew,
shows?
it was big. So there was one point of contact over there. He was just a private person. He did have a lot of paratrooper connections, a lot of aircraft connections. So he was our main point of contact, but then he kind of delegated down. And one of the reasons we were able to get on That's All Brother is because the executive officer of our unit knew a lot of people too, and knew the crew for That's All Brother. And so he was able to put our unit on that aircraft. So, yeah. But it was just one point of contact over there, but it was a lot. I would not have wanted his job at all. A lot to coordinate. Yeah. Anyone
It's
else?
very interesting.
Well, thank you. Well, I really appreciate y'all being here today. I hope you got a little bit out of it. And again, if you'd like to come over, feel free to pick up the parachute if you'd like. Just please don't grab it by that silver handle, or we'll have kind of a spaghetti mess on our hands. The static line, you can pick that up and take a look at that too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.